This is Monica Perez here with Chuck Ochelli of the Ochelli Effect. And I think what we're going to do today is your kind of classic swap cast. We're just going to talk about whatever we want to talk about, ask each other questions, just have a conversation. It'll be very fun to catch up on the news from or anything that's happening in the world or on his mind from Chuck's unique perspective. So, hey, Chuck, how you doing?
Monica, I'm really happy to be here with you because, in our pre-air conversation right away, one thing that was said that was beautiful is nothing is off limits. So I'm happy to discuss with someone who can articulate about what's happening in the world around them, something that doesn't have limits. So let's go for it from there. Can I describe myself? I don't think I can.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your background and also kind of your political perspective. Are you a political agnostic? Did you come from the left, come from the right? I know that you were on TNT. I'm curious to know your view on world politics and just, remind my audience, because you've been on my show before, just kind of your background, both in podcasting and also just your perspective.
Well, I think I'm the master of self-sabotage because I have this problem with, speaking my mind and utilizing my intellect in the way that I describe. Look, I don't try to fool anybody. And what happened is I lasted a hot 8 days on TNT radio, right? Oh now they've been rebranded. Okay.
I think they went out of business. They went under. Did they start back up again?
Oh yeah, now there's some other, they have some new name and they literally picked up all those facilities, and I don't know if they paid everybody or whatever. I don't know the whole details on it, but I do know they're back out there, rebranded with effectively a lot of the same people that were behind the scenes, still behind the scenes. Look, I'm not going to sit here and bash them or anything like that, but I got to tell you, they did not get what they thought they were getting when they got me, and vice versa. So that's what happened. They said, look, be honest, do something that is, more honest than the corporate media that lies to us. And I said, oh, check. That's something I do just by waking up. No problem. I could do any of this at any time. Sure. So what did I do? First thing out of the gate is I interviewed somebody who was right there when, despite what you think about it, when, guess what? Ukraine was being invaded. So I was trying to explain from a civilian's point of view, and not me explaining, not my point of view, but hello, you're a guy on the ground. What is happening? Okay. Forget about it.
I have to say, you're absolutely, I know that you have a position. I remember you criticizing Putin, which is fine with me, but I would not call what happened in Ukraine an invasion. And I'm only saying that because I was taught a long time ago, if someone says something that you just let slide, people will think it's also your opinion. That's not my opinion. My opinion is there was a U.S. coup run by Vicky the Noodle, and it took 8 years for Putin to react, but they anticipated his reaction, and they talked about it. And of course, I'm sure he was the one who released the audio, the hidden audio of them talking about it. But yeah, I have a different perspective on that. But absolutely, you would be welcome to bring somebody on. Now, I would personally love to talk to somebody who was on the ground, even if they have a totally opposite perspective. So I wouldn't have canceled you for that.
Well, as it was happening, right, you got a civilian on the ground. Oh, right. And what did I do? I just said, tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
And look, you want to argue over whether it's an invasion? Cool, great. But was it Putin's land to deal with, regardless of whether there was a coup or anything else? Is that his problem necessarily?
Well, they asked him to, but okay.
Yeah, but see, here we go, right?
Right. It's a question of, I wrote a whole article about it, like the Vattel's Law of Nations and what it takes to assert your independence, get a change of government. I went back to what justified the American Revolution, the situation in Crimea. And, so yes, I agree. It's something you could really talk. Is there such a thing as territorial integrity of a modern nation state, as Obama said was the justification? Right. So we could definitely have that conversation.
Right. And then concern about what's on your borders necessarily. Like currently we're dealing with problems on our borders, right? How much of what goes on in Mexico is spilling over into our country? So where does our responsibility begin? There is a complex conversation there. But when I brought this guest on, my point was, you're a civilian there on the ground. So obviously you see things I don't. Tell me what's happening.
And you can bring that to the listener, and the listener, I I've been on the screen with people before where I'm like, this guy's not even telling the truth about the situation. Like he has an alternative or whatever. And, but I expect the listener to be able to discern that. I let people tell me what they want to tell me. And if they're on the ground, I'm like, oh, that doesn't sound right, or that's your perspective. I just figure, yeah, let's hear it. The closer you can get to the primary source of the information, the better a person, a listener or whatever, or myself can evaluate whether, how much of a grain of salt, is it a limited hangout or whatever. I feel like that's
it's sad that you even need to explain this, Monica. It really, this is what's sad to me. You should not even have to do this dance right now. I'm sorry. I don't mean to characterize it as
it's not a dance. I'm just, I like to make things clear of what my perspective is. I think it's helpful.
I know, but here's the thing. I guarantee you people who have stuck with you are intelligent enough to know this. So this is really for the brand new, the uninitiated, if you will. This is what, and that's what drives me nuts, is you constantly have to reinitiate people into this because hardly anyone is actually thinking for themselves. The majority of people that were reacting to the Putin thing and what was going on in Ukraine and what is going on in Ukraine are reacting based on cues that are being given to them from someone else. It's not their own analysis. And
agreed. Ukraine, the Ukraine flags, you could ask them what started this and they wouldn't even know.
Well, but there you go. The people that are supporting Ukraine and the people that are supporting Putin, both, quite honestly, the majority of the time, have not analyzed a damn thing.
I agree.
They have taken a cue and they run with it. And especially on social media, you see, I'm on this side, I'm on that side. Let me step away from that.
That's a tag is a flag of another country. That's a pretty big cue to me that people are not thinking straight.
Well, but why not? You got a rainbow flag up because you think you're supporting, people that are being oppressed, socially, etc. There's all sorts of flags,
Yeah, right. Flags. We could talk about flags, the meaning of flags.
The beauty of some of George Carlin's statements is they still work, right? I leave the symbols to the symbol-minded.
Nice.
And that's where I'm at, with it. So, but nonetheless, it was something that needed to be reported on at the time. Again, my total exact time of employment, 8 days. I lasted a lot longer on Mike Adams' radio network, maybe 7 or 8 years before, didn't I? And don't get me started on that. But, here we go. I'm the guy who gets in there and they think they've got one thing and they get something else because I'm the continuously misunderstood. Here's the truth, and here's going to be an ugly word, and it's going to make a whole bunch of people now turn off this discussion between you and me. Ready? So this is me thinning the herd, all right?
Let's see.
I am actually a leftist. Now, that is not, I'm with Kamala, whatever. Okay. Whoever, whatever she is. I'm not with her, okay? I'm actually on what used to be the left side of a lot of things. You'd have to throw me into the left side. I wish that whole Antifa psyop was something more legitimate. But you notice as soon as the paycheck stopped, Antifa disappeared. Anybody notice
it's meant to corral people into a silo so that there are certain, you can't, if you step out of what their basket. So there's the basket of deplorables, and then there's the other one. You just they want to keep people within the confines of acceptable thought, whether it's from the left or the right. But we probably have more in common than not in common, because I don't think it's an ideological battle at all. I think it's just really the ideology keeps us distracted from what's actually happening, which is this technocratic takeover.
Well, see, now there's the funny part. Now, put a pin in technocratic takeover just for a moment, because we got a lot to get to here. Yeah. Okay. But here's the funny thing, and I want to speak about this Antifa thing because it's so funny to me. Everybody was worried, waiting for the revolution to come from the Antifa. And then, quite frankly, it seems to me like, oh, gee, it stopped getting funded, so nobody would print the T-shirts and give the anarchists their uniforms. Yeah, I just said that. They give the anarchists their uniforms.
That's funny.
So therefore, the anarchists went home, okay? They weren't getting paid anymore. That's the real solution to that whole thing. But remember, Antifa was this movement that was going to destroy America. We need to be patriots, on guard, on ready. And I used to be in with a lot of those guys, the patriot guys, the guys who were like, we should be self-sufficient. We want to do this for ourselves. All this stuff. Okay. That's where I was, though. I was on the patriot side. So never forget that actually being on the left is not unpatriotic. Being the opposition even to the government is something healthy for discourse. And
I actually think that the way I'm not a huge fan of the Constitution. I prefer it to what we have now. I would like us to go back to the Constitution, but I'd really like us to go back to the Articles of Confederation. But the way it's set up, if you have I personally think that a lot of laws, of real laws, like laws where I would think legitimate law is basically don't touch me or my stuff, but the purpose of a court or an authority or whatever might be, I would say, to distinguish between what's your stuff. So if everybody has a house on the river and one guy puts a dam on it, is that okay? Does he now own that water? Like issues like that are real issues that are fundamental to, I would say, a law.
You're starting to sound very libertarian to me, Mark.
I'm just going to finish first. And then if you have a whole country that has extremely different geological situation, like ways of growing things, whatever, the only way to have an umbrella government for that is if you let the states enforce, implement, whatever, representatives, however, laws that are specific to their land, which a lot of times goes hand in hand with their culture. So I'm not one of those ones who wants the 14th Amendment to say that the First Amendment applies to state law. Like I think if states want to be more totalitarian, more controlling, more regulated, I don't, from an American point of view, from a constitutional point of view, I don't object to that. So you could have your leftism and not oppose the Constitution, in my opinion. You would just have to not try to expand the Constitution to enforce that stuff on lots of other people. Like abortion is a great example. California and New York absolutely are never giving up abortion. I think it's part of the Constitution here now. But if Mississippi doesn't want it, that's great. Like it doesn't have to be a national issue. It doesn't have to be divisive. If you can have representative, subsidiarity, like the government closest is the one that can rule on some of these things. So I think it's okay to be a leftist and still defend the Constitution. I don't think it's inconsistent. I shouldn't say be okay, but I don't think it's inconsistent.
Mm-hmm. No, but that's the point. It's not inconsistent, and you can be, and you're sounding very libertarian. Look, maybe we need to sort these things out in the court, but generally speaking, how about the concept of, non-aggression? How about so long as you're not injuring me? Look, your rights to swing your fist around really stop at the tip of my nose. Very simple concept. I appreciate that. And that is a truism. I believe in that sort of thing, and that's what makes me problematic, really. Because what I've witnessed is that people go through a lot of justifications, and even some of the stuff you just said, people utilize it to justify their need to enforce their belief systems upon others. This is problematic to me. Now, I'm not saying that, you can never how about if I believe murder is okay? No. We have a general set of guidelines here, okay?
But that murder is not a federal, generally speaking, there's really a few federal crimes. And certainly constitutionally, I think it's just basically counterfeiting.
But right.
And treason.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, even the murder issue is a local issue. That's why abortion, some people think it's murder. So, but it's still a local issue. It's not in the Constitution. So yes, people who want to impose that on the country generally on either side of that argument, in my mind, the Constitution is there just to make sure that those kind of really fundamental disputes still don't undermine the association, the federation, which I don't care about the federation, but I'm just saying it's meant to for us to still be on the same side, for us to still be part of one country.
Fair enough. And here's the thing, this concept that there is an overwhelming, absolute sort of American culture. All of these things are works in progress. We're a nation that has only existed for about 250 years. It's a fairly short lifespan. And I believe it is similarly on some levels, it's an empire. It has
definitely.
gone out there and planted roots. It's not a colonial empire because we're not always colonists, but our expansion, our influence, all these things, these things have gone on. And while you and I go over these different, pieces of minutia about how we need to unify a front, there is an existing unified front that does work in tandem and is accomplishing, group goals while we're arguing about these things. And you brought it up just a little bit ago, and it's amazing to me. People that were objecting to the technocracy, people that thought it might be a bad idea to let billionaires be in charge of everything, are very happy right now, a lot of them. And I'm trying to understand them. Okay.
Yeah, I just tweeted this. Let me see if I can find it.
Absolutely, please.
Here we go.
I want to find just a handful of people who are seeing the same thing I am, because we're clearly not being heard by the majority of people out there, but it needs to be heard that, if you were nervous about the 1984s and the Brave New Worlds, this is the groundwork literally being laid in front of you. People that control, the majority of discourse through these social media platforms are all unified behind this current administration. I'm not saying.
So here's the thing that I tweeted. Shit.
And the funny thing, before I see your tweet is going to be up on screen, and it's probably going to be a barn burner. But when you hit it, it's great. The thing is, I got a funny question for you. How is it that George Soros's people are involved in the last 4 administrations, and nobody thinks that somehow there might be commonalities between them? No, every 4 years we have a grand change here now since, Obama got in and he was the second term. And of course he was a bait and switch, kind of product out there being marketed to us. Fine and dandy. Trump replaced him. He was different, but they resisted him. It's funny because the technocracy's been pretty happy throughout this entire time period. Just since election day, by the way, what is it? Bezos is probably the biggest loser because he only made an additional 24 billion since election day. But I mean, Zuckerberg made another 50, and our friend Musk, who has access, through Doge and all these agencies and his tech bros guys that are moving in there, he's made another 150 billion just since election day. So they're doing quite well. It seems like all those trends are going quite well. And by the way, the evil leftist, people that they seem to have relaxed against the heroes that you think you believe in, and I don't mean you, Monica, but I mean, this is my mass question to the people that said, we can't turn over our lives to the technocracy. We can't turn over our lives to these people who are way richer in a stratosphere well above the majority of anything any of us are ever going to see. The rich are not meant to rule us necessarily. This is not a Calvinistic system, where God blesses people to succeed, and therefore you can tell who is blessed because of the success.
Dominionism, I think. Okay, so what I tweeted this morning was what I had coined in 2017, the contrary law of democracy, which in 2017 I wrote, I've noticed that if the powers that be want to perpetuate an unpopular war, they put a Democrat in to silence the anti-war left. If they want more spending and debt, they put a Republican in to silence the fiscally conservative right. This practice is called giving left cover or right cover. But I have begun to notice that the rule is it's the rule, not the exception. It will take a Republican to increase infrastructure spending and debt. And this was in 2017 before Trump doubled the national debt or whatever, added so much to it. I think 40% increase, while Democrats will make a comeback to oversee the next leg of the endless war. Biden escalated Ukraine, and this was after I wrote this. In short, you are likely to get the opposite of what you were voting for in a democracy that ultimately thrives on silencing constituents, not representing them. So I agree with you that it will, and I had a hashtag that went along with that. It will take a Republican. It will take a Republican to implement gun control. It will take a Democrat to escalate the war. So I agree with you. It's an old trick.
Yeah, but the old trick is now going to change in front of everybody's eyes. And here's the beauty of it. A lot of things are going to emerge that you would think should have come out through the alleged left. And I say the alleged left again because this notion of the left that we have in America is false. It's a false equivalency to what used to be those standards. Okay, there is an ideology. It's like people who think that the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. was most revolutionary because he wanted to put black and white people together. That wasn't the thing that got him a bullet in the head. I'm sorry. That's not it. It was actually challenging a much larger structure that was much more entrenched that people were paying no attention to.
Which was what?
Okay.
The war?
Well, you have the war in Vietnam, but you also have the class war. And it's undeniable what was going on, the Poor People's Campaign, et cetera. We may have a little bit of a freeze up here.
This is not. It looks like I've got connectivity. Do you?
We are back. We are back
Okay,
to being
great.
able to talk. Something interrupted. See, and I got to tell you that this coincidence occurs many times when I'm on an electronic. Whenever I try to bring out something that is not meant to be heard, it happens. So I brought up Martin Luther King Jr. Did you even hear that?
Yeah, and I was asking. Sorry.
Oops, and there she goes again. Now, this is being locally retained, I think, via her platform. But I don't know why I am losing connectivity with Monica here. And I will, she'll get this recording and hear this pause. But the thing about King is that he was challenging the structure that has given us the modern invisible caste system in America. You have no upward mobility. That concept of being able to successfully navigate your way to the top of the heap, so to speak, is gone. It has vanished because it really was not meant to be there in the first place. And you could not continuously harvest from what we had here the individuals necessary to continue to feed that system. Now, I don't know if Monica heard any of that, but
I heard most of it. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully this recording is being retained because that's the nice thing about your system here that you use, just so you know.
Yeah, I'm recording locally.
Yeah. So, but the thing is, I got that out. But I'm telling you now maybe we'll go back to normal as we move away from that. But that's but that's what caught him a bullet in the head in 1968, really. It wasn't the objection to racism, because you can do that all day, and you can do that whether you're making any sort of strides or not. That can be erased in an instant. The status quo can be maintained easily. The actual, racial order of things can be maintained quietly all the time. It's not an issue, and they can do it, freely or not at any given moment. So that's not an issue. But when you actually challenge the invisible caste system, the fact that there is no, that weird little dream, because, I'm in my 50s now, that weird little idea that you could be anything. You could accomplish whatever you want. You could gather anything you want. Why? Because you're in this unique time and place that is America. It's not just a place. It's a time. It's a mentality. It's a culture. Now, that culture is continuously evolving and devolving, but this work in progress, this constant, will allow you to do extraordinary things if you put in the hard work, if you put in the effort, if you do what must be done. And that's the weird thing. That absolutely evaporated without a notice. No news stories on it, really. You're done. You're in a caste system. You are only going to be able to rise to a certain glass ceiling. And it's got nothing to do with your sex, your race, or anything else. It's got to do with the status quo and the game of numbers. And the technocracy now is in there. And with the support of the people, which I find amazing, miraculous almost. Because I would have thought that not possible. Go ahead, Monica. Sorry.
Yeah. From my own perspective, I'm the youngest of 9. I dropped out of high school. My mother was super upset. She had me come back and go to community college, and I transferred to Harvard, which was an amazing thing. And then I went to, basic quasi Ivy League graduate school, whatever. And so it seemed a very attainable rags to riches American dream kind of story. And I would just say 2 things about it. One is, as you do that, and you get, even if you get like I was an investment banker for a while, a big job, you've spent so many years in school, you've accumulated so much debt, which is not tax deductible. And then when you go out in the world, like the expenses of working, I mean, I worked at least 80 hours a week. You have to live in the city, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of expenses, and you just are always chasing that, big pot of gold at the end. So it's even actually, quote, making it as definitely a bait and switch. But I would also say that the reason I actually had those opportunities was because of standardized tests. I was really good at standardized tests, and that was just a way to get in. And I think they're doing away with that now, so that if you did want to do something like a moonshot, like transfer to Harvard, it's going to be less based on any kind of disconnected abilities, and it's going to be based, in my opinion, on your political position, the essays that you write. So now I think there was a letter recently sent out from the whoever federal entity sent out a letter, maybe to Harvard, to other schools like that. I just read it this morning, saying you cannot discriminate based on race, which is great. You shouldn't discriminate based on race. But how are they going to keep if they retain the standardized tests, they're going to really end up probably with an unbelievably disproportionate amount of Asians. So the only way to deal with that situation, and I think that's the reason they're doing it, is to eliminate the standardized tests and make your politics, your story, the sole way of getting let into that upper echelon of, I guess, high staff position, bureaucracy, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I would say I had a little bit of a leg up post MLK, but I feel like that door is closing as well.
Okay, so coming from a completely different life experience, let me inject mine into this real fast and give you an idea of how you and I can come to the same conclusion despite having absolutely, completely divergent paths. Okay. Yeah. So I'm a guy who was living on his own, finishing high school. Right. And that's what I did. I lived in an apartment in New Jersey, and I finished my regular high school while I went to a factory to work in the afternoon, and then went and practiced with my band at night. Okay. I was a musician. All right. But weird path. A few years later, with just the high school degree in my hand, and being denied by the government any assistance for my father being a veteran because they couldn't find his military file for a little while, but literally threatened to prosecute me for claiming that he was a military veteran. Whole story there, and really winds up motivating my need to dig into the JFK assassination, but that's a story for another day. The thing is, I work my way up and get myself involved on a local level with a corporation later to be named ExxonMobil, but was just Exxon at the time I got involved, right? Got in on the retail and used my intelligence as best I could. And this is all working from a position of having about 10% of the eyesight of an average person. All right. Worked my butt off. Did not get special treatment because of my disability. But then again, there was things going on there regarding trying to give people with disabilities access, which, today would fall under, in some people's minds, DEI. But I didn't have any of that, even though we had the Americans with Disabilities Act, et cetera. I worked my ass off. I was putting in 80, 90 hours a week doing the kinds of jobs that other people hired people that they barely taught English to do, and worked my way up into management positions, got the attention of the people in Texas who were running the corporation, and showed them that I was useful. All right. Which is pretty much, if I was to name the book of my life story, it might be Show Them You're Useful. Because that would be my whole life. And again, I came from a nasty background, okay, real nasty background. I had become almost like a mascot for local wise guys at one point. I was running around with, I literally met one of the guys on the commission. I shook the hand of Tony Salerno as an 8-9-year-old boy. All right. So you're talking about a kid who was, I'm not a murderer. Okay.
That's like good.
That. But you know what? On a local level, I had mob guys telling me, we see where you're going to be, and you're going to have to learn to be useful. And that's really what they were saying to me, honestly. They tried to guide me. These were, and to me, I always say they're, Italian businessmen. But the truth is, we're talking about the same people, but not the big stars most of the time, okay? But the guys who actually, do the gritty work on the bottom. The guys who are running like, stolen trucks of mops, out to places to resell them at a cut rate, this kind of thing. Sure, there was hookers and drugs and whatever, but you know what? That's Hollywood. We're talking about the rest of the underbelly, and that's where I was. That's where I came out of. And I decided I'm going to graduate high school. I'm two generations away from immigrants, and nobody had graduated high school in my family line at that point. Not normally, they had gotten GEDs and stuff like that. So I decided I'm going to do that.
I don't think our backgrounds are so different. That's not unusual in my family.
Okay. Well, but the thing is, when I hear, you got a chance to go to college, I didn't. You got to, and things like I had.
Well, but I didn't pay for it. Like I got a scholarship based on that thing. I'm just saying, like all of my brothers and sisters dropped out of high school also. I was the first one, and I'm the youngest of 9. I was the first one to go to college. So I'm just saying, and I'm from Rockland County. Like I just don't think we're as different.
No, not at all. You see, I was just about to say the common link here, though, is you and me both working at the position that we started from as hard as we could, and with the belief that this would assure us in the future that we would be able to have access to and accomplish things if we worked hard enough, if we put in the blood and sweat, if we put in using whatever our talents were, like standardized tests, not so great at it.
It's on one way, it's an unfair advantage, but it was the only way for me. And now that door is closed.
But that's the thing, is you had a path and you took it, and I had a path and I took it, and we tried to do, but you see, I came up against a wall. Now my wall is probably a different wall from yours.
Yeah.
But eventually you came up against a wall where you were like, well, I can keep going into debt and I can keep investing in this, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee a return.
I agree.
And that's where I was at, even with ExxonMobil, even with, look, if you play the game right, and they had me in human resources, basically, is where I was going. So I was going to be one of those people to figure out, and I was good at figuring out what is the most efficient way to get 5 people to do the jobs of 15,
HR, it's funny. They tell you that it's there to protect you, but if you actually, when you dig in, you realize what it's really there for. It's to protect the company, which of course they're paying them. That's what they're doing it for.
Well, it's to protect the company, and it's cost benefit analysis. Which again sounds pretty sophisticated to the street level kid who was, selling joints for $1 in 1979 on the street. But effectively it's the same business model. Okay. When you're dealing drugs, okay, as a kid, and I did that for a little bit, not as a major career, but I did it for a minute because I had to know how that worked. Here's the thing. It's very simple. You get the thing you can that people want as cheaply as you can, and you get it out to them, spending as little as possible to create a better return. And it doesn't matter if you're selling gasoline, shoes, or, popcorn. Okay. It's all the same. Heroin, same thing. It all works the same way. Okay. And that's the business model. Okay. You might have gone after different things. Okay.
And that's how I start. Two of my siblings died of drug, whatever. One was an overdose, one was AZT poisoning. But I saw it, and that actually I think is more of a benefit of being the youngest, because I saw that. So the 4 kids above me all dropped out of high school also. And so did I, but I could see that it was a dead end pretty quickly. And so I turned back, but I think that was just the benefit of, you probably didn't have that. Negative. I always think role modeling is great, but negative role modeling is much more powerful.
Well, right. And here's the thing. I didn't have siblings to watch their mistakes.
Yeah, so that makes a big difference.
Yeah. So I had to, what did I have to learn from? What I could glean from the street level, what I could understand. My father was gone when I was 4. He had committed suicide, so he was gone. And he had been a veteran of the Vietnam War, regardless of the Pentagon's denials and his personnel records, etc. Wow. He had been there, and quite frankly, I now know why it is they lost his record for something like 25 years, because it's a falsified record. That's the bottom line. That's as far as I've been able to get in that investigation. And by the way, I investigated his suicide, all self-taught. etc. In my 20s, I went back and, literally
How do you
stole.
even have a chance under those circumstances? Like, I
Well,
don't know how you can, get yourself together. It must have had such an intense impact.
but it did, and my mother was, when I was born, she was 16 and my father was 20, so,
Wow.
this is the circumstance. And 4 years later, he's gone. And like I said, I got 20-year-old mother who had not even really reached adulthood before she gave birth to me. And frankly, she was a junkie.
Yeah.
So, I was on my own and still had this idea that it doesn't matter, because if I can just show that I have the right talent, I'm not going to be able to shoot a basketball. I'm not going to be able to, I'm not going to be a great actor. I did have the idea that I liked talk radio even then as a little kid,
Yeah, that's
but
cool.
it didn't quite, I didn't know what to do with that just yet. We hadn't really seen the rise of the talk radio star anywhere.
Yeah. I think it was Imus in the morning, right?
He was, and I was there in the New York, New Jersey area where he was. So, but he was the exception. That was the one guy that you could say, well, there's the one personality guy. If you can figure out what to keep people busy with for 4 hours in the morning, you could make a pretty good living. But I didn't take that as seriously as what was in front of me. And again, I had to survive in the meantime.
Yeah.
So, so there's a lot to it. But anyway, those pads, and the only reason why I bring it up is that it doesn't matter. If you look at the big differences between you and me or the commonalities, it doesn't matter, because eventually you hit a ceiling. And I hit a ceiling with that, ExxonMobil thing, where it was like, either you're going to callously handle people and we'll allow you to make a little bit more of a living. In the 90s, you could go from $50,000 to $100,000 to $150,000, which wasn't a bad living in the 90s.
Oh, no way.
But I was able to make $50,000 unless I really started to abuse a mass group of people. That was the way that I interpreted what I saw, is if you can really learn how to squeeze people from a distance, people whose names you're never even going to memorize because they are just a number on a sheet, mainly. If you can function that way, we'll pay you pretty well for that. That's what it came down to. And I chose to remain on the local level with people who were running their own, franchises and things like that. And that was not the path to greater wealth. And then, like I said, my soul just said, this cannot be. You got to find another way. So I tried and struggled a bit. And then also had a bad marriage and et cetera, et cetera. So anything I had accumulated up to that point, that went, the guys that complain about losing half, I envy you.
Yeah, I've heard stories like that before.
I walked away with a garbage bag. Away with a garbage bag full of a few things, and that's what I ended up with out of that. And there you go. So all my hard work, what did I accumulate?
So, you feel like this was different in, say, the 50s? You think that? I mean, I think it was. I think guys didn't have to go to college and could make a good living, whatever, white collar living if they wanted, a blue collar living if they wanted. And
what kind of school system were you in when you were growing up?
I went to Catholic elementary school and I went to public high school, and all my family originally was in Brooklyn. And then, so the top kids, the first half were like relatively more wealthy, because in the city in Brooklyn in the 60s, my father was a butcher and they had food. They went to the local Catholic school. It was fine. But then when my father moved to Rockland to get away from the crime and everything, the younger kids, then it was the 70s, and the younger kids, the suburbs were just full of drugs and you couldn't get around. It wasn't like the city where you could walk places. And then they started doing drugs and dropping out of high school. All those kids dropped out of high school. And it was, and then my father could hardly make any money. We were very stressed and stretched in the financial sense. But even then, like I look and I think there were, plumbers and electricians, stuff. People could make a good living and take care of their kids and everything. But the 70s was a terrible depression. And
yeah, and there's the funny part of this, right, is because you and I experienced this. Both of us did, but from different angles. You were part of what we might describe now as the white flight from, the city. And meanwhile, I was going into the city from New Jersey in order to work with the people I needed to work with as a kid. except I was going into East Harlem and stuff like that. And people don't recognize, they think, oh, crime is so bad on the streets today. You don't know nothing.
Oh my gosh, it was terrifying back then. I mean, I accidentally got off on the wrong stop in the subway.
Yeah.
Up there. And it's not, I don't even think it's as dangerous for people who live there. But when you're like pop up out of the subway in, a skirt or something looking like you do not belong, it's nerve-wracking.
Oh,
I don't think it's like that anymore.
Yeah, 1978 to like 1983, at the height of when I was like really going in and out of that area and that was a totally different landscape than what people, I mean, like it's almost cartoonish. I mean, bodies were dropping.
Yeah, and the
murders
stuff was just, windows were all boarded up. Like the city, there were just blocks and blocks where there was no activity at all.
Right.
No economic activity. It was really terrible. I think that's when Mayor Koch was elected.
Well, before that, Beam, right?
Yeah.
And then Koch. Koch was an improvement, but
that's what I'm saying. Koch was an improvement, and then Dinkins was terrible.
And Dinkins was a disaster. But the hilarious thing about this is that I'm coming from, boarded up and shut down, places in Asbury Park, which now today it's a totally gentrified. It's a interesting little area with wine shops and stuff like that. But if you look at, Bruce Springsteen's Asbury Park, where he's talking about, people are broke, man, that's where I grew up. And then I'm going into New York, into more broke areas because that's where opportunity was.
Yes. It was tough. I mean, I was like a third generation of kids in my family. There's like the top four, the middle four, and then me, other kids. So I was an 80s kid, but the other kids, all the 70s kids dropped out of high school and moved to Colorado because there was like a boom out there. I think an oil boom.
Yeah.
And it just, they were just waitresses and stuff, but you had to pick up and go. Now it feels like economic and real estate trends and everything hit the entire country at once. Like there's no way to move around. And then what do you do when you have all the surplus labor that you let in during the good times over the borders? And then I don't think we've had so COVID, I think, was a totally artificial depression/recession thing.
Right.
And it did everything that a depression usually does, which is fires a bunch of people, blows through inventory, businesses go out of business, things get consolidated. And the pain of that was masked by, we were just told that like, this is because of the, pandemic or whatever, which is ridiculous.
Right.
But so I think in living memory, people don't really understand that these recessions do come along and they just kind of decimate the workforce and really are hard on society. I'm afraid we're heading into that now.
Well, and here's the weird thing is that, our whole, and I think you're of a similar enough age to me that I could count you among Generation X. Here's the thing.
Yeah, Gen X.
Gen X is the absentee landlord here because we didn't show up on the political scene for the most part. We stayed out of a lot of stuff. We were really living up to the whole credo they gave us in the 90s already, where they were like, you people are so apathetic. You're not going to participate in a lot. Yeah, a lot of us saw that there was no point in participating in a lot of things that these people had seen as standards before. But now that we've done all that reminiscing and we realize that there are people that literally have no living memory of 9/11 even, okay?
Yeah.
Are probably listening to us that don't remember the war on terror at this point even, okay? It's a weird circumstance. Why were we in Afghanistan? They have no clue. And they don't remember any of what came before it or what the groundwork that was laid. Now we need to deal with what's happening at the moment. And again, I'm asking, why is it okay now among people that 10, 15, 20 years ago would have been willing to shed blood to keep the technocracy from taking over? I mean, if you just go with some of the baseline reporting about Elon Musk, and I don't care what you think of Elon Musk, right? But honestly, do you think that this is the guy that you'd want to trust with, your stuff? I mean, just think about it like that for a second.
He's, in my opinion, he's completely fake. I mean, it's just fake. Like he's just the face job. He's not even in there looking at anything.
Probably not. And that's even more frightening, is it not? Because if it's not him, then who is it, right? Like if he's the face, who is it that's behind him at this point? Who actually knows what's happening? Who actually understands this? See, that's the funny thing is when you see these statements come out and they go, well, there's going to be a little bit of pain and I can do this and I can do that, even though, you know, it's got nothing to do with our Constitution, the way the government's structured. And I'm not even saying that I'm all on board with every single way the government is structured. I'm just saying that these people have gone, well, I'm going to go outside of the system. Now, imagine that this was somebody you didn't root for, okay, who said the same. Imagine Barack Obama did this. And as a matter of fact, I don't have to imagine. I remember people freaking out the moment that Barack Obama went on a television station and said, I have a pen and I have a phone. So screw Congress. Okay, basically, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But I remember people flipping out.
Yeah.
Because he said, I can make executive orders and I can find out things and communicate with my phone. So, you know what? If you guys are not going to work with me, I can go around you. People.
And I used to say that. I used to say, you're allowing this. The people who were supporting him in that are just setting themselves up for a day when they don't love the guy. They don't trust the guy. That's the problem with the continuing to expand the presidential power and allowing these guys to get away with making law from the executive branch. Administrative law this is the exact setup, the exact problem of why administrative law is and should be unconstitutional. They shouldn't have legislation from the executive branch. There's no checks and balances on it. And the only thing that people have right now is that, and I keep saying this, and the people who believe that Trump's draining the swamp or whatever, they cannot understand what I'm saying, which is you are trusting his motives and his competence. So you're saying, I think his goal is what I want it to be, and I think he's going to achieve that goal. But there's no accounting for it. There's no accountability here. It's just, and Elon Musk is not, he's a guy who supposedly runs 5 companies and all he does is tweet and run around and act silly. And then we're supposed to believe that he's actually the guy who's making these decisions and examining all the entire apparatus of the bureaucracy. I mean, it's not believable. And if you don't realize something else is going on, you're in for a big surprise.
Well, and now the funny thing is, again, people that said, you know, they were shutting down they're shutting down our criticism. They're shutting down everybody on the right. They're not allowing them to speak. Well, here's the funny thing. They want to shut down any opposition to saying anything. And I'll tell you, Musk is a great example of it, because even though he didn't start PayPal, and even though he didn't actually start the corporation that we know as Tesla, and even though, and I can keep going on that list, he has literal agreements with people that you're not allowed to say that if you're part of those companies. Okay. Even though in a really direct sense, he didn't start PayPal, he bought in.
How do you know that he has those agreements? I'm just curious. I believe it 100%. It just rings true, but I'm just wondering, did you hear about it? Did you see it? What
because
makes you
people have been punished in court actions for doing so. Right. He's made statements that have been made public. You're not allowed to say this to people that actually did start these companies.
Yeah.
You know, so these communications have been made public when he's made some threats against people and taken them to court. So before a gag order gets put in, these guys have floated stuff. So you can find it if you dig. You can find this stuff where he went, you know, toe to toe with some of these people that did actually start the company that became. You know, like X. X was something that he wanted to brand PayPal with a long time ago. The board stopped him from doing so because at the time, X would have been taken as porno, you know. Nowadays, X means something else, and he's slapping X all over everything, regardless of whether he started it or not. I mean, in the remade history, sometime in the near future, he may be the guy who invented Twitter. You know, like Al Gore invented the internet. I object to all this. You know what I'm saying? If you're full of crap, I want to say you're full of crap, and I should be allowed to. But here's the problem again, because you're meant to root for this guy, you can't question it, and you can't question the process. Like, let me ask you a benign question, right? Just looking at, you and I probably agree, the federal bureaucracy, the government's bloated. There's probably 100 people who have jobs to do nothing in the government that we could find on any given day. 100 people, please, thousands, hundreds of thousands, who knows? Well, here's the thing. if you're going to cut and slash all these people off of the work rolls, so to speak, how do you think that's going to affect the unemployment numbers in about 6 months? 6 to 8 months when people's unemployment benefits run out. You think that's not going to cause a massive amount of people to have nowhere to go if all they do is work in the government bureaucracy?
Do you know what actual numbers there are? Like, because I see a lot of this slash and burn. People are worried. They act like they're cutting government. I haven't seen any actual numbers of cutting actual spending or cutting the size of the government. And I don't know how many people are losing their jobs. Is it going to be a drop in the bucket? Is it going to be localized to DC?
Oh, yeah. You got a lot of good questions. And here's the thing. We don't have answers. But if I go with anybody's numbers on this, theoretically, you're talking about a huge layoff. Okay.
But a lot of those people are taking kind of the severance resignation path. I mean, retirement path, I think.
Maybe not. See, that's not even fully, we haven't seen the structure for that presented either.
See, I don't feel like I'm knowing the details here. So it's easy for the media to throw stuff around, and I'm just thinking this is all meme stuff. I want to know the nummies.
See, in fairness, you and I are sitting there going, okay, that's a nice statement, right? But where's the actual? See, this is always the problem. I made this point to Richie Allen recently, where it was like, dude, here's what kills me about people coming to me with a very niche sort of concern. I'm kind of known for doing analysis on the JFK thing. People on some level, unless they really hate my politics, still trust me to tell them a lot of truth about that. And recently, I even had a guy on the show who played a tape, which is a pseudo confession of people on LBJ's inner circle for the murder, by the way. But, I was behind AJ on that. What can I do? But I knew about this guy and Billy Celestes for many years. It's just that, AJ got him first. What can I do? But I had a long talk with Shane Stevens. Put that aside. So people know me for this. They have been coming to me continuously saying, aren't you happy now? And it's like, why? Okay, what's making me happy? Well, Trump has done this and this and this for the JFK, for transparency, for revealing things about the deep state, for the CIA's being forced to put out stuff. And I got to stop all of them and say, guys, nothing has actually happened yet. Right. You have an executive order, true. You have lots of public statements, true. But have any of those files actually been released? No. All of these things, even though they're saying the FBI came up with an extra 3,000 pages, and that is wonderful and possible and probably the tip of the iceberg. And even if you do get it all, you're not necessarily going to get, hey, we're the CIA, we did this.
Right.
We're the the ONI. It's actually the Naval's intelligence people that killed the president. You're not going to get a document like that.
Well, what did he do the first time? What did Trump do in the first administration? He did give up some of those documents, but they were nothing burgers. Am I right?
Well, look, he didn't give up crap. Here's the thing about that. That was stuff that, you ready for this one, was put into place by George H.W. Bush, who signed into law the JFK Records Collection Act.
Oh, yeah.
And then Bill Clinton actually put it into existence, a office in the executive branch, the ARRB, the Assassination Records Review Board. See, there's a lot more in the sausage. You understand?
Yeah.
So this is the stuff that was 25 years later supposed to be released from the 90s. 2017 was something that JFK researchers were waiting for literally a quarter century. Because we were like, a lot of work has been done, but the CIA and the rest of the government said, we need another 25 years to hold back on a bunch of these things because they're going to relate to things that are still ongoing in the 90s, mind you. Okay, this is the truth about what happened in 2017. Nobody wants to hear it. Trump is there. All he has to do for that stuff, all of it to drop, is nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Okay.
It's not even his decision. What he has is the power to delay it again. And the intelligence community came to him and said, sir, we need you to delay this some more. They didn't even follow the proper procedure that was in place to name exact documents, specific reasons why each one of these documents needed to be delayed, et cetera, et cetera. They went to him literally at 0 hour at the date and said, we need more time. And Trump said, okay. So effectively, in old school, old man, even older man than me terms, he kicked the can down the road for release. Now, some people said, "Oh, he was just waiting for his next administration." Look, you can make any excuses you want, but he gave in to the national security state and their request for more time on something that they were waiting for a quarter century. That was really from 50-year-old documents almost by then. That's what actually happened.
So
then Biden gets in. Well, hold on. You got to go to
go for it.
Because Biden comes in and goes, "Hey, Trump kicked the can down the road. You know what we're going to do? We're going to take the can off the damn road, because now it's not even we're going to leave it in play." And meanwhile, what they were delaying there is not all the rest of the secrets like the media keeps telling you. It's just the stuff that was already worked on by committees, by investigators, by people verifying and collecting documents in the mid-90s. For God's sake.
Mm-hmm.
So when people go, "Oh, well, this happened." No, you don't know that there's a process. You don't know what's been released, and you're just taking the pronouncements. And I want people to take this as a lesson. You're taking pronouncements as action. That is not the way of the real world. I don't care what your politics are, but just because somebody talks a good game doesn't mean they did a damn thing. Again, I'm sorry, street level, Monica, that's where I go. Like I tried to explain to somebody the other day when they were complaining about what it is they're being told, and it wasn't politics, it was on a personal level. And I said, "Don't you understand that people tell you things not because they're anxious to tell you the truth? They tell you things to get a reaction. They're in search of a reaction. That's why those pronouncements are made. And that's the point of it. It's not about what they really did or what they really can do." And on this very personal level, which I won't explain here because it's somebody else's business, I explained that somebody was telling them something to get them to react, even though it was not even realistic. And that is the key to the communication age we live in. You are being told things to get you to react or to not react, and to get you to be happy with what's happening, to get you to be, "You know what, everybody sit down. Why did they elect a black president?" Okay, in 2008, it was to shut down the whole objection to black people don't have a place at the table, brown people don't have a place at the table. That was one of the key elements to why Barack Obama needed to emerge in the time period that he did, because there was a lot of stuff going on there, and it might have become dangerous if you still left it as black and brown people do not have stake.
I almost wonder if it was the opposite, that like the idea you would hear people say, I noticed this the past couple of years, like our young people don't even know about the Holocaust. Like, I feel like if there was racial tension was easing up, and that I thought he was just going to put the last nail in the coffin, but he and Eric Holder, I feel like they made it so much worse, just launched us into this, this era of, in artificially created racial division.
Well, you know what? Again, a pair of scissors can be used to do more than one thing. Okay, so among a population which was ready to explode because they were saying they were not being heard, they were being given the, "Hey,
okay, yeah,
you are." Now, among a population that had proclivities to go in the other direction, sure, you go in the other. It is not a single side. Look, all objects in our reality, as we understand them, are in 3 dimensions, and for a reason. You can do this from more than one angle, and at the same time, there is such a thing as the whole 3D chess concept, which I'm tired of hearing about. But
Bill Cosby back then was getting a little bit of traction, like his pound cake speech or whatever, which was so controversial and offended so many people. And he actually kind of retracted that after they put him in jail for a while. But I remember, so I feel like the powers that be had to do something to derail alternatives. So that validates your position, I think, is that yes, people were no longer being placated by Democrat promises and needed something more.
And there's the beauty of the Bill Cosby circumstance, is that it can be utilized for many purposes. Yeah. Okay. It is because there is truly a radical black element that is completely misunderstood by those outside of it. Okay. And I don't even claim to have a full understanding of the intellectual basis for it. But the whole thing is not about, racial unity and let us to the table. There is a whole other thing that goes on there that is hardly ever heard of by anybody, that it really would probably frighten the hell out of the majority of people that are sitting complacent and think that somehow, you sitting there, you, John Q, whatever, have an actual stake in this government and the greater system, with your good job and your little piece of property that you think you own. Even though, you're still like a resident and all that, you got to look at your paperwork. But anyway, here it is. It can serve more than one purpose. And Bill Cosby served a lot of purposes. It gave people this idea of black excellence and what you could reach to attain to. And here's the responsible guy and et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, something was going on there where obviously he was not in the elite position where he's being protected. That was still being reserved for the Jeffrey.
And they totally steamrolled his constitutional rights. I did a lot of work on this, and I call it, it's a phrase I coined, he's a sacrificial wolf. So they take somebody like Weinstein or Cosby, who garner no sympathy because of their behavior, and then steamroll them rights-wise. And nobody can object because, I defend Bill Cosby for that reason alone, but it's a very lonely place because nobody wants to be seen as defending him. Men can't do it. And I feel like that sets precedents for things like opening up sealed depositions, not allowing a witness. So that was one of the things. The reason they didn't prosecute him in the first place is that he had a witness who overheard the woman plotting to extort him. And they said, this will never go over. So then when they tried him way past the statute of limitations and in contravention of the deal he had, they didn't allow that witness to take the stand. So these are precedents that may be set. Now, it was overturned. I forget the reason it was ultimately overturned, and he was released from prison. But these are precedents, and I think they use unsympathetic people. So yes, I agree. Bill Cosby's situation from beginning to end has many applications. Right,
and again, I hate to use this phrase, but I have to. The beauty of it is this: multiple things can be true at once. Bill Cosby could be the kind of guy who got into a position of power and did what a lot of people, when an excessive amount of money and an excessive amount of power is handed to the wrong person. Okay. And happens often. And it could be a Weinstein. It could be anybody. He could have been somebody who was taking advantage of women, who was drugging them.
Oh yeah. No, he wasn't. No, he was offering them Quaaludes and they were taking them.
Okay.
Quaaludes are not roofies.
No, I get it. I know that. Believe me, I understand. I am just saying I've never used these things.
Yeah, personally. He was definitely engaging in scuzzy behavior for sure. Right. But no matter, he wasn't, even if it was illegal, it was the time to prosecute him had passed.
But there you go. See, now here we are. Is there a legal system with, no, it can morph to do whatever. And this is my problem with the legal system and in general, and why it is, I would love to support the concept of a death penalty, but I don't trust the system, you see. And so at this time, I do not believe that any of our system of justice is in a good enough shape to decide over life and death. It's way too rigged, way too often.
Yeah, I agree.
So I can't support it in concept. If I could know with certainty that, people were being, there are heinous enough crimes that, you have surrendered your right to live. And that's a weird position to be in.
I agree with you totally on that. You just can't trust the government. And treason is a capital offense. So if the government embodies an anti-constitutional stance and you defend the Constitution, the people in power there will say that you are committing treason. It's a paradox. You can't have it. It can't work.
Right. I mean, and take a look at the odd, even if you just look at one of the more interesting sort of throughways of this, the legal system and the way the government reacts to being attacked. Take a look at the way different presidential assassins were treated. Would-be assassins in some case and successful ones in other cases. I mean, we can go everywhere from Squeaky Fromm and Sarah Jane Elmore, which I love Gerald Ford for the fact that he's got 2 female would-be assassins. And, that's pretty rare among presidential assassins. But you take a look at it and you see that quite often they say these people were anarchists. And they're not always one guy was, Godot, I think actually was, but the majority of them had mental problems where they seem to, and this is another industry you got to go into and go, wait a minute, are we sure about these pronouncements? See, here's the thing. There is the industry and then there is the alleged science. And this works for law. This works for, the putting stupid masks on your face. This works for, was the pandemic an actual thing or not? It works for all of it. Is that once you get labeled a certain way, you're allowed to be treated a certain way. And I don't see how that works with any of the pronouncements that you're given from any of the ideologies in the past. I don't understand this. Your classification automatically gives you a menu now of what you are allowed to get from the restaurant of justice and what you are not allowed to get from the restaurant of justice. And yes, indeed, there are limitations based on your finance and et cetera, but all of it combined together shows me that we do not have a fair system. We do not have an impartial system. Lady Justice is indeed not blind. Okay, she can see, and I guarantee you she can see through that blindfold. And whoever controls her really does control the rest of the world, because no matter what you try to do, a court can overturn it. It doesn't matter if it's in your personal life or you're in the government or anything else, a court can overturn it or support it, and that is the way things will go. And, you could take it all the way to the Supreme Court. Yeah, that's an illusion too, because they select the cases they take.
Oh, yeah.
So never ever believe that you can always continue to climb unless you're allowed to do so. And that's the thing that people seem to forget while they're celebrating. And while we're seeing, that there's no actual alternative media left and all of that, because there's no actual opposition, Monica. There's no opposition left. It's all fully controlled at this point. And now I've taken up well over an hour of your time. And I apologize for that. And we had to go through a bunch of things here to get to what in the hell is actually happening at this point in time. And I said something that, like, Richie Allen was a little bit flustered for a minute when he's talking to me, because he's like, nobody's heard from you lately about recent events. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not really doing news podcasts at this point, because in my mind, there's no news to report. What we have is a lot of declarations, a lot of celebrations, a lot of demonizations, but it's all based on what somebody tweeted, what somebody put on Truth Social, what somebody decided to show. We literally have people believing that the world is being run by their social media experience.
That's a good point. I mean, the whole Elon stuff. I mean, the things that I think Trump tweeted the other day, a man who saves his country commits no crime, or some crazy stuff like that. And it's like, why? It looks like The Onion. It seems like parody. But yeah, you're right. These little half sentences come out and they shape people's emotions.
Yeah.
And they think that that's an opinion.
Yeah.
They feel like it's an opinion.
And if you don't believe what Monica just said, you know what? Go ahead back in your Wayback Machine on the internet, if you like, and go to when Alex Jones's website was taken over by The Onion for a minute. Because it was. And people forget that now, but it was literally The Onion had control of Infowars.com. Okay. And when you looked at what they had on there, it was pathetic. They could not compete with the reality. And they were a standard. Look, they used to be funny.
Yeah, no, you can't make fun of something that's already so absurd. But what did you think, speaking of absurd, what did you think about the July 13th alleged assassination attempt of Trump? What was your initial reaction, and what do you think about it now?
My initial reaction was pretty simple, which was that, first of all, people are going to make this into whatever they want to make it into. And at the end of the day, this was a school shooter who in Pennsylvania was faced with the fact that schools were not in session. That's what happened here. And what did
you don't think it was just a totally staged event?
No, I think, I don't think that you usually murder somebody like this kid under most staged events like this.
Yeah, I know. I think they're starting to actually kill people I think that for a little while they were doing hoaxes, I think just to let our guard down. But now I think they're back to actually killing people.
Right. And what Trump got hit with, and I don't care what anybody says, is according to my estimation, what I could see and what was reported and everything else by people who didn't have a dog in the fight is that this guy got hit with a piece of shrapnel. He wasn't even actually hit with a bullet.
What did the bullet hit that threw shrapnel off?
Probably one of those, glass things that
oh yeah, maybe
teleprompter, the invisible teleprompter. I mean,
I don't think he was hit by anything, but I could see, there being a possibility of that.
Well, I'm being generous here because it appears as though he was wounded in the real-time footage. It appeared, but the wound is not a bullet wound. You don't get your ear pierced with a bullet. I mean,
I got you.
And the funny thing was people wearing the sympathetic bandage at the convention. I mean, like watching this whole cosplay thing unfold.
So great.
And again, look, to me, Trump is always going to be a real estate hustler from Queens who, ran a massive PR campaign and people elected him. And that's it. And if you understand that and you look at what he said about Gaza and all these other places.
What about his deeper state ties, like the John Trump MIT professor stuff and his father getting rich through government contracts and his relationship with Roy Cohn? I mean, it may be a little more sinister than just Queens. P.T. Barnum from Queens achieves the presidency.
Well, I know. I understand, appreciate, and sympathize with all of that. But Monica, here's the problem. When you try and explain to somebody that if you were building anything in New York City at the time that Trump was allegedly building things when he actually used cement.
Yeah. That was nuts.
That you could not pour more than a driveway back then.
Yeah.
Without involving, Paul Castellano and his guys.
Yeah.
So, the idea that he never was involved with mobsters. Here's the thing. I shook Trump's hand at one point.
Oh, wow.
Back in the 90s. Back in the 90s. And it was, I
was behind him online at a convenience store. Yes.
Oh, cool.
We could. Yeah, there were. He was on the ground for sure. Okay. Keep talking.
Well, the funny thing was, it was during this time when he was working with Vince McMahon. And now you see the results of that now. McMahon. Well, anyway, they did this WWE like bodybuilding federation or some crap was going on in Atlantic City, and Trump was all in on it. And they had a special room where people could go, but no media could go. Okay. And the only reason why I was there is because I knew some of the security guys that they had to bring on as extras, to defend, to protect, because you had WWE stars there. You had people like Donald Trump showing up, the celebrities to support the bodybuilding federation or whatever the hell it was called. And I had friends who they used to hire locally, MTV and these other entities, because they were good at security.
There you go. Keep going.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry about that.
That's okay.
But what happened is I'm in this room with these guys who are not meant to be seen by the media. And there were guys there that were Italian businessmen that I knew. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. I got some kind of weird inconsistency with a wire. I apologize there, Monica.
That's all right. We're good. It was only just a sec. I can hear you now.
Gotcha. Okay. Anyway, so I was in there and these guys are cracking jokes about him as he walks in the room. They said, look, he stiffs everybody, because back then he was stiffing his dealers. He was stiffing these Polish workers or whatever that he had brought in to build stuff there in Atlantic City. He was losing money already and nobody knew it nationally yet. But all that was going on. These guys are going, you know what? One thing I can guarantee you is we're always going to get paid. And I'm like, okay, why is that? Because other people were complaining about how Trump doesn't pay you.
Yeah.
He settles for, pennies on the dollar and this kind of, this was his normal business. Anyway, and this is long before he supposedly had political aspirations, even though he had these exploratory committees and things out there that most of the public didn't know about. But still, I'm in New Jersey, so I got access.
Yeah.
But they're making jokes and they're going, you know what it is? Because at the end of the day, one thing he knows is we're still able to put him in the trunk of a car. And they're joking.
Is that still true?
Well, but they were laughing.
Can they get to him now?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Well, somebody might. I mean, I do like, I don't think the original assassination attempt or any of the subsequent ones were real, but I definitely think he's in danger. I don't like it at all. I am not looking forward to a real mass trauma event. Like they happen and I don't like it. But so I think we should kind of wrap up a little bit, but what else do you have on your list? Let's hit a couple of more topics if you want.
Well, let me just close out the Trump topic with this.
Yeah, do it.
I don't for a second believe that he will be assassinated or injured in any significant way.
Good.
And I'll tell you why, because here's where you and I might diverge greatly. I believe that he is serving the exact purpose that he is intended to serve. Whether he knows it or not is another issue, but I think he is absolutely doing what the real powers that be want.
I agree with that. Yeah, keep going.
So there's no reason to remove him. He's serving.
No, I know, but if you were finished with him, you could. Those big traumatic events are used for, as you know, with JFK, just lots of purposes. Once his usefulness starts to come to an end, and it may serve as an object lesson to other people. It may. I don't know how much information he actually knows, but it could make sure that he obviously plays ball, so I don't think they have to worry about him speaking out of turn. And I do think that he's setting it up for his kids to have kind of legit political careers, the way some businessmen, like if you watch The Godfather, like we have to get legit here. I feel like it's like kind of a laundering operation of the family back to.
I always wanted you to be Senator Corleone. Hold the strings. Yeah, I know. Look, and that's where we're going. So there's no reason to martyr him until at least after this 4-year term is over.
Yeah, I don't even like saying that stuff out loud because I think it's bad juju and I don't like it at all.
Yeah,
but yeah, it does concern me, their safety. But I used to worry about Obama too, because they would put all this bad press about the Secret Service out there, and I thought they don't put.
And there were legit attempts to eliminate Obama. There was a few nearly successful attempts too. You know, Obama, Bush,
and that makes me think it's real if it doesn't get much press.
Yeah, but there were legitimate attempts to eliminate Obama. You know, those things did occur while he was in office, and we really haven't seen that with Trump yet. But then again, it's still very early, and I really have to stress, no matter what, if you think he's the great hero and he's fighting the New World Order and all that, okay, fine, I can't dispossess you of that, but understand he hasn't been able to get that much done yet. Nothing has happened all that big just yet.
I do think this Doge thing is. I think it's getting buy-in for the transition to a highly automated, centrally controlled apparatus of government. I don't think the size or scope of government is going to shrink at all. I don't think the budgets are going to shrink, but I think they've probably been training AI for a while. So what happens is you're at your desk and you do stuff that trains AI, and then they can eliminate your position. And I feel like that's where they are right now. So maybe he hasn't done stuff yet, but I mean, what's happening right now is, it was turnkey and they're turning the key. It seems like to me, but I would have to dig in a little more on the details, but it does feel like something is happening. Baudrillard notwithstanding.
Yeah. But even late last night, they were drawing up budgets late last night, and the Senate was going through a whole bunch of stuff, and
are they cutting the budgets by 70%? I doubt it. They might be cutting the workforces, but not the budgets.
See, that's the thing, is if you assume that they're making all these massive cuts and everything, then take a look at what it is they're about to present, because the House and the Senate are working on, and they are the people that actually decide what gets funded, by the way.
Of course, yes. Yeah. That's one of the distinctions between us and the parliamentary system, is that the Congress, that's why line item vetoes are terrible, because what they do is Congress puts all that stuff in there, and then that gives us inordinate power to the president. Also, what is totally maligned but should be in there are the earmarks, because the earmarks are Congress saying specifically what to spend the money on, and Congress is the House, I believe, or that's tax, but yeah, they're the ones who are supposed to determine how the money is spent.
Right. And here's the other fun part about that is, you brought up the parliamentary system. Well, remember, the king can turn around and dissolve the parliament. Okay. So we have that advantage here where the king is not supposed to be, because people seem to think president and king are pretty equal at this point.
That's a very good point.
George Washington would disagree with you a bit. Just saying, founding fathers and all that. But it's really remarkable the amount of things. I'm just saying, beware of the idea that you're being told that something's happening, and maybe nothing has happened, and maybe very little has happened, and maybe the opposite has happened. Don't be misled. And we don't have an alt media structure at this point.
No, I know, it's crazy.
And even the opposition, the alleged opposition. Here's the funny thing: I try to monitor all this, and the alleged opposition, the typical American left, the very best representative of that online to me is this like Midas group. Okay. And they are hilarious because they make a few good points and then they just sort of, descend into this madness about the country is turning against Trump. And I'm like, where do you live? I mean, this is not happening. You're reporting things that make no sense after spending all this time trying to tell us that you're going to tell the truth that nobody else is going to get to. You're now descending into things that make no sense. It's like having Rachel Maddow do a marathon, 27-hour broadcast. Toward the end of that, it's going to be insane, the amount of weird things she's going to say. But they have a whole network devoted to it, and it's funny, with Michael Cohen on it and all that. I find them hilarious, almost as hilarious as, watching Sean Hannity at this point. See, I can't stand either side of this nonsense.
Yeah.
This is what makes me a bad guy, though, because you're not picking a side. No, I am picking a side. Guess what? I'm on all of our sides. The rest of the people that don't have a microphone, that don't have a massive audience, that's whose side I'm on, because we're all going to have to suffer through whatever these idiots at the top decide to do. And, Yeah,
and I think that the escalating tension between left and right at the top and the politics and everything is just such a setup. And the way they activated a kind of alt-right to consent to extra constitutional behavior, that contrary law of democracy really kicked in there. But I feel like both sides are in on it. I guess at some level, this is the last question I'm going to ask you. At what level do you think there are two sides, if at all? Do you think on the world scale, Chucky 3 runs the entire world, or Netanyahu, or domestically, do you think the CFR versus the CNP or whatever? Like, do you think there are two sides at any level, even on Earth or even in the universe? Is there a God and a Satan? Where are there two sides anywhere? Or more than two sides?
There are a lot of sides. Okay. And here's the thing. It's from our perspective, we need to face what is beneficial to us and what is not. But you know what? To my mind, there are many gods, and some of them, even though they might be extremely omnipotent and powerful, don't give a crap about what's going on here anyway. And why would they? It's like worrying about the ants in your yard. When was the last time you gave them a thought? In some cases, but there are also entities that do enjoy playing games. There are children that love to take, or used to anyway, when they still went outside, used to love to take magnifying glasses and burn the ants. Why did they do that? Because they could. I think we're watching that happen on all levels. There are people that have gotten to levels of power. There are entities that have gotten to levels of power, that have gotten control, that have gotten to play games here. And in a way, we're sort of like the best virtual experience that we can hang on to is that we need to understand there's plenty of influences out there. And you might have a few choices if you decide what you allow to influence you. But outside of that, you can't control the universe.
Yeah, that is true.
Well,
I feel like the hope is that there is a spiritual dimension, and that we don't need to control the universe, but if we control our own behavior and hearts and souls, that's hopefully the real reason that we're here, because then you do have some power over it. It's very disheartening to think that you have no power.
Right. And you know what? And you called this the dark side of hopium. I know that's a working title, but I
We can
love
leave
it.
it.
I love it. Leave it that way because it's beautiful. And why is it the dark side of hopium? Because here's this sad, sadistic trick here. At any moment, if we all collectively decided to, move in one direction truly and not just unify ourselves on the savior of the moment or the savior of the decade, or, here's our leader, which you didn't select that leader, whether you think you did or you didn't, you didn't actually choose that person. But regardless, if we stopped looking for leaders and started leading, and we created the things that we wanted to see as opposed to just living off of whatever falls off of the high table, we could change all of this collectively. Will we is another question, and there's the dark side.
Well, let's revisit the subject and see what happens in the months to come. And would love to talk to you again about your evolving thoughts as we start, things actually start happening.
6 or 8 months from now, I'm telling you, look, even if you believe all the pronouncements, people's unemployment benefits will run out in 6 months, right? Everybody gets 26 weeks, I think. So you know what? Here it is. We'll see a difference in 6 or 8 months. Promise you. And not just based on that, but just based on the actual real flow of things when a new administration comes in. No matter what they try to do, no matter how radical or not, guess what? You need 6 or 8 months before you're going to start to see, holy crap, my neighborhood changed. Okay. Yeah. So wait, that's all I got to say about it. Just wait and see. And, with the JFK stuff, stop asking me. Nothing's happened yet. As soon as it does, I'll be the first guy to tell you about it as soon as I see something that's tangible. But so far, a lot of pronouncements, an executive order that's a little vague, even asking for RFK assassination stuff, even though that's not really within the federal government's power to do, because that investigation was actually conducted through the LAPD. Good luck. Anyway, my point is that there's many things to be unfolded here. And I'm hoping actually that people are going to see the mistakes that are made. Because I guarantee you, no matter how omnipotent Elon Musk is or anybody else, we're going to see massive mistakes, and we're going to feel them one way or another. And I hope they're not too bad. I would love for the whole world to all of a sudden be fixed by one guy. Sure, I would laud him. I would say that's the greatest guy in our generation. Thank God we got this guy from South Africa.
I know.
But again.
Yes, I do hope that all the hype is overblowing how much they can really accomplish. So yeah, let's keep our eyes open. Maybe the end of the year will show us, shed some light on it. So exactly. I'm gonna wrap this up, but I want you to hang on because I need you to upload your stream. So hold on a second. This is Monica Perez here with Chuck Ochelli of the Ochelli Effect. Thank you so much for listening. Bye, y'all.